Additional amendment. Do we have an additional amendment? You are a guest. Please take your seat. Okay. Okay.
Amendment number 100.
Please read the amendment.
Amendment number 100, sponsored by Maya Berry.
Will the amendment come up, please? Can we get it up? Thank you. Thank you. Please read the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You might have to do it loud.
Amendment 100 on page 34, line 2. The proposed amendment, sponsored by Maya Berry. The proposed amendment states, after the words peace and dignity, add the following. We also call for an international effort to rebuild Gaza, which the UN warns could be uninhabitable by 2020, and where poverty and hopelessness undermine peace and security for both Palestinians and Israelis.
I'm going to ask you to read it a second time.
Amendment number 100, sponsored by Maya Berry, on page 34, line 2. The proposed amendment states, after the words peace and dignity, add the following. We also call for an international effort to rebuild Gaza, which the UN warns could be uninhabitable by 2020, and where poverty and hopelessness undermine peace and security for both Palestinians and Israelis.
The Speaker has 1 minute to introduce.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As the clerk read, we call on the international...
Please just identify yourself.
My name is Maya Berry, originally from Michigan, and now I'm from the state of Maryland. As the clerk read, we call on the international effort to rebuild Gaza, which the United Nations warns could be uninhabitable by 2020, and where poverty and hopelessness undermine peace and security for both Palestinians and Israelis. That is the language of this amendment.
Thank you. Are there 15 seconders? There are 15 seconders. Will anyone be speaking in opposition? There will be an opposition. 5 minutes are granted to the proponents of the amendment. 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to start by noting that during our last, because we don't have the opportunity to rebut, we made the point about final status items need to not be in our platform. Our platform is full of final status items with regards to Palestine and Israel, and I think that's particularly problematic. This is simply language that addresses a humanitarian crisis in Gaza. It is incumbent on our party to call for supporting the international effort to rebuild Gaza. These efforts have been insufficient, slow, and we owe it to both Israelis and Palestinians alike to make this a priority. We will undermine the security of both Palestinians and Israelis if we cannot provide a vehicle for Palestinians to live a dignified, free life. Gaza has 43% unemployment, 60% youth unemployment. Gaza faces a humanitarian crisis. According to the UN, 95% of Gazan water is not safe to drink. Oxfam estimates it will take more than 100 years to rebuild after the recent conflict. Of the 1.8 million people living in Gaza, 100,000 still are homeless as a result of the 19,000 homes that were destroyed. This is a territory twice the size of DC. This is a humanitarian plea to do the right thing. It does not impact the other language. It doesn't impact the conversation that happened in St. Louis. It merely suggests that we have a heart and a compassion, and we're capable of applying it to both Palestinians and Israelis.
Brother Chairman, one of the great prophetic figures of the 20th century, Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, said, indifference to evil is more evil than evil itself. And I'm talking about any slice of humanity, no matter what color, what religion, what sexual orientation, agenda. And when you're talking about Gaza, you're talking about a level of such incredible misery and unbelievable suffering. And during the attacks just a few years ago, over 2,000 were killed, over 500 babies were killed, and not a mumbling word from any of our political elites. What is going on in this country? What's going on among our elites? Are we so paralyzed? Are we so debilitated by either money flowing or indifference in our hearts? I would hope not. That's what the legacy of Martin Luther King Jr. and Dorothy Day and so many others are all about. And if this party is going to pose and posture as if it's got an even hand orientation, we will always say, no, you don't. You have to be equally concerned about our precious Jewish brothers and sisters who have to deal with the crimes coming out of Hamas. Yes, Hamas has to take responsibility for killing innocent people, and that's a crime against humanity, but so does the IDF, so does the Israeli Defense Forces when they kill innocent folk on the other side. If we are not able to deal with that, then we're in the same condition that this party was in 80 years ago when it didn't want to deal with Jim Crow, didn't want to deal with lynching, locked in a state of denial and saying somehow these Negroes are going to make it through with this misery. I refuse to reach that conclusion.
Thank you, Dr.
That's
West.
why we ought to be concerned about Gaza.
Thank you, Dr. West. We have 1.5 minutes remaining in the debate. 1.5 minutes. One and a half minutes.
Nancy Jacobson, Florida. I rise in support of the amendment. It is a humanitarian crisis, and this is when America is at its best, when we help others. In addition to the misery that we would seek to help, it's actually, they're in despair, and despair breeds violence. It is in Israel's best interest for us to support this and to try to rebuild Gaza, use our best efforts to do that.
Thank you. 30 seconds.
My name is John Yoakum from Nebraska,
30.
and I don't represent a candidate. I represent Nebraska Democrats. Nebraska Democrats believe that the people of Gaza need salvation, and we can help them. Let's help them.
Thank you. That concludes the 5 minutes. Now we'll hear from those not in support of the amendment.
Thank you. Good evening. Phil Recht from California, speaking on behalf of the Hillary delegation. We all agree the situation in Gaza is a terrible tragedy, and that Gaza needs financial assistance to restore and rebuild its economy. But the poverty and the hopelessness in Gaza are not the result of the lack of support or desire to rebuild Gaza. In fact, Israel and the international community already provide and allow, albeit not without significant difficulties, for the flow of humanitarian aid, including food, medicine, building materials, water, and electricity to Gaza. Instead, as the platform suggests, the real key to ending the suffering in Gaza is a two-state solution that does two things. One, provides Palestinians with independence, sovereignty, and dignity. And secondly, that guarantees Israel's future as a secure and democratic state with recognized borders. As the platform also suggests, this can only be achieved by direct negotiations between the two parties and their elected leadership. This is the only approach that will put an end to the suffering in Gaza and bring stability and dignity to the people who live there, and it's something we all must strongly support. The amendment, while drawing attention to the terrible suffering and plight in Gaza, nonetheless distracts from this focus, and we urge opposition. Thank you.
We have an additional speaker? No, you're for it, against it?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay. The for discussion has been had. These are the individuals who are arguing against the amendment. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mark Stanley from Dallas, Texas. I'm a Hillary Clinton delegate. I want to put a practical spin on this. There's no one who doesn't feel the compassion for people who are suffering. But the issue is that this platform has already been litigated. This particular provision has been litigated in the platform drafting committee and came up with a compromise platform statement on the Middle East and on Israel and the Palestinians. If we take one issue, Gaza, and say, let's open that up, then we have to open up all of the other issues that we want to talk about. In addition, We're only talking, if you open up Gaza, for instance, and talk about people suffering, you're not talking about the other side about it. You're not talking about missiles that are leaving Gaza and hitting Israel. You're not talking about tunnels that are going into Israel where people are trying to kill Israelis. You're not talking about Gazans who are trying to take out the water utilities and the electrical utilities that feed the Gaza citizens. Why are we going to relitigate this now? It's been done. Please vote against this amendment.
Anyone else wishing to be heard against the amendment? You've already been heard. All right. If you could clear the aisle, we're going to go to a 30-second vote. If you would put the vote up, please. Please do not vote until I ask you to. Please. Please vote. Fifteen seconds. Five seconds, please, please. Okay, the amendment fails. Do we have an additional amendment?
We do. Thank you, Mr.
Please
Chair.
read the amendment.
Amendment 162 has been withdrawn. Amendment 114, sponsored by Terry Tucker, on page 34, line 32. The proposed amendment is to insert after the word economies the following. Democrats applaud President Obama's national strategy for combating wildlife trafficking and his commitment to preserving the Earth's natural beauty for future generations. Democrats support science-based management of iconic wildlife of hunting trophies that are not supported by current science-based evidence and are related to or funded by non-scientific special interests.
Thank you. I'm going to ask you to do that one more time.
Sure, no problem.
Thank you.
Amendment number 114, sponsored by Terry Tucker, on page 34, line 32. The proposed amendment is to insert after the word economy